Have you ever just stopped and wondered what makes you, well, you? What makes you so different from your friends, your family, or pretty much everyone else on the planet? I mean, really think about it. Why are some of us total social butterflies, while others would much rather just have a quiet night in? What is that secret sauce, that unique recipe that makes up our personality? Well, you're not the first person to ask. This is a question that humans have been wrestling with for thousands of years. The greatest minds in history have been on this exact same quest. So today, let's follow in their footsteps and see what they found out. Okay, our first stop is way back in ancient Greece. This is where some of the very first theories about personalities started popping up, and they connected everything, not just our minds, but our bodies and even our place in the universe. Picture it. It's around 400 BCE. The Greek physician Hippocrates comes along with this totally radical idea. He suggests that our personalities aren't just random or handed down by the gods. No, he thought the answer is actually inside of us, in the very fluids coursing through our bodies. This was his famous theory of the four humors. The idea was that our personality is basically a cocktail mixed from four main ingredients: blood, yellow bile, black bile, and phlegm. Seriously. So if your internal cocktail had a little too much blood, for example, you'd be a sanguine type, cheerful, social, and optimistic. And you can actually still hear traces of this today. Ever heard someone called choleric? That comes straight from this theory. It meant you had an excess of yellow bile, making you ambitious, but also kind of quick-tempered. Now, it might sound a little weird to us, but this was a huge leap forward. For the first time, someone was trying to systematically link our biology to our behavior. Of course, it wasn't all about biology. You had philosophers like Plato, who saw personality as this constant tug-of-war inside us between reason, our fiery spirit, and our basic appetites. And then his student, Aristotle, took a different angle. For him, personality was all about your character and the moral choices you make. Basically, you are what you do, over and over again. Now, let's take a trip across the world, because the Greeks weren't the only ones pondering these big questions. Let's head east and see how ancient Indian and Chinese cultures were thinking about personality, but with this really beautiful focus on balance and harmony. So in ancient India, the Ayurvedic tradition had a similar idea to the Greek humors. They believed our personalities were a unique mix of three fundamental energies, or doshas. The goal wasn't just to understand your type, but to keep those energies in balance for a healthy, harmonious life. And over in China, philosophies like Taoism and Confucianism emphasize the balance of opposing forces. You've heard of yin and yang, right? And the importance of living in harmony with the world and with yourself. So for centuries, these ancient philosophical and biological ideas were the best explanations we had. But then, in the late 19th century, something happens that changes the game completely. A brand new field emerges that promises a whole new way of looking at the mind: psychology. And this was a massive, massive shift. We're talking about moving the conversation out of the realm of philosophy and into the controlled environment of a laboratory. The questions were the same, but for the first time, we had scientific tools to try and answer them. And things took off fast. I mean, just look at this timeline. In the span of a little over a decade, the entire foundation for the scientific study of personality was basically built from the ground up. So, let's meet the people who made it all happen. First up, we've got Wilhelm Wundt over in Germany. This guy's a big deal because he opened the first ever psychology lab, officially making psychology its own separate science. His main technique was something called introspection. He'd train people to carefully report on their own moment-to-moment thoughts and feelings, trying to break down consciousness into its most basic parts. Meanwhile, back in the US, you have William James, who was looking at the bigger picture. In his epic book, The Principles of Psychology, he explored this fascinating idea of the self. How you're both the person experiencing the world, and at the same time, you're the person thinking about that experience. He was really the first to connect the dots between our habits, our consciousness, and our sense of who we are. And then in England, there's Francis Galton. And get this, he was Charles Darwin's cousin. So inspired by Darwin's work on evolution, Galton became obsessed with measuring the differences between people. He created some of the very first tests for things like intelligence, and he was a huge believer that our personality was mostly shaped by our genes and heredity. So when you look back from the four humors in ancient Greece all the way to the first psych labs in Europe, you can really see this amazing evolution.
each one of these thinkers, each one of these ideas laid another brick in the foundation of how we understand ourselves today. You can really see the whole journey right here. We started in that pre-scientific era with these big philosophical and early biological ideas. Then came the early scientists who started trying to actually measure the mind. That, in turn, paved the way for the giants of the 20th century, like Freud and Skinner, and eventually brought us to where we are now, with a modern approach that combines everything from genetics to culture.
But you know what? This ancient quest is far from over. The fundamental questions these early thinkers asked are still being debated today, especially that big one, nature versus nurture. So I'll leave you with that to think about. What makes you who you are? Is it the DNA you were born with, or is it the life you've lived?